panel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also broadcaster and journalist, Danny, even you're laughing at it, Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4:01. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The leader of the Liberal Democrats has branded the Conservative Party incompetent and morally bankrupt. In a speech to the party conference, Sir Ed Davey blamed the UK's rising cost of living on Russia's war in Ukraine and criticised the government's attempts to tackle the issue. He called for a stronger windfall tax on energy giants, higher taxes on banks, and said it was time for a general election.
After inflicting so much chaos, the Conservatives want the rest of us to pay to clear up their mess. They're already talking about more unfair tax rises, more cuts to pensions and benefits, more cuts to schools, the police, even our NHS. All to fill the hole they themselves created. It's like they robbed our bank and now they're asking us for a loan to buy their getaway car. Well, we say no. Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, instead of inflicting even more pain on struggling families and pensioners, it's time to start helping. Put a proper windfall tax on the blood oil profits of the fossil fuel giants. Reverse your tax cuts for the big banks. They are unfair and unnecessary, and use those extra billions to give people real help with energy bills, to protect pensions and benefits from inflation, to safeguard schools, hospitals and councils from cuts, and to help homeowners struggling to pay that Conservative property penalty.
Alok Sharma has opened COP27 in Egypt by urging world leaders to take concrete steps to tackle global warming, saying inaction will lead to a climate catastrophe. The president of the COP26 summit, which was hosted last year in Glasgow, admitted that despite progress in the past year, the world is not on track to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees.
How many more wake-up calls do world leaders actually need? A third of Pakistan underwater, the worst flooding in Nigeria in a decade. This year, the worst drought in 500 years in Europe, in 1,000 years in the US, and the worst on record in China.
The Prime Minister will pledge to make the UK a clean energy superpower when he addresses the COP27 summit tomorrow, urging all countries to move away from fossil fuels. He'll warn that tackling global warming is fundamental to future prosperity and security. Mr Sunak will also argue that the shock in the oil and gas markets caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine highlights the need to move to cheaper and cleaner sources of energy. The government has announced that a pilot scheme to reduce the backlog in asylum seekers will be rolled out nationwide by 2023. The Home Office says the 8-week test run reduced the time asylum seekers waited for a first interview by around 40%. Almost 100,000 migrants are currently awaiting a decision on their asylum claims. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the programme will digitise applications and speed up the process. Nurses across the UK have, for the first time, voted in favour of national strike action in a dispute over pay. More than 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing were balloted, the biggest ever in the union's 106-year history. The walkouts are set to take place within a few weeks, possibly before Christmas. It's likely patients will face disruption to operations and appointments. The government could revive the British Bill of Rights in a bid to tackle the number of migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats. The legislation would give UK courts supremacy over the European Court of Human Rights, preventing judges in Strasbourg from interfering in government policy, including sending migrants to Rwanda for processing. The bill was shelved by former PM Liz Truss, but the Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says its return would end the, quote, abuse of UK law. Tanzania's state media says at least 19 people have been killed after a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria. 43 people were believed to be on board and 26 have been rescued so far. Emergency workers and bystanders have been helping to pull passengers to safety. Precision Air is Tanzania's largest privately owned airline. Local media reports the plane was trying to land at the city of Bukoba in stormy weather. National Highways has secured a High Court order to ban Just Stop Oil protesters from disrupting traffic on the M25. The order states that anyone entering the motorway, attaching themselves to any object or structure on it, or assisting others can be held in contempt of court. Protesters could face imprisonment, an unlimited fine, and the seizure of their assets. And the Prime Minister has announced an extra bank holiday to mark the King's coronation next year. The holiday will take place on Monday, the 8th of May, after His Majesty's coronation on the previous Saturday. Rishi Sunak says he looks forward to seeing people come together to celebrate and pay tribute to King Charles III. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Oh, God. COP27. Rishi Sunak has decided that he will now go after all. Now, he initially got my respect for deciding to focus on the mess that he has created at home, which I suspect many would like him to do. But he's now about turned on that decision, one that appeared to coincide with the announcement that Boris was going, The Tory party are like the hokey-cokey. You put your left leg in, I mean, they've gone so far left, it might as well be Labour. Your right left leg out, in, out, you shake it all about. Come on, panel, do the hokey-cokey and you turn around. That's what it's all about. Oi! Yeah! Yes, you see, the reason Rishi is now going to tackle climate change is because he thinks that tackling climate change helps the economy. I think that's code for if Boris is going, I'm the Prime Minister, not him, although, in a way, he is right, it might help the economy. Net zero will indeed do just that. Big business, that is, makers of electric cars, heat pumps, solar panels, wind turbines, etc., will make a fortune out of us. So he's not wrong. But I question whether you can actually tackle climate change. If it turns out you can't, which in my view is the reality, there's a lot of money to be made trying. I would buy shares, but sadly my mortgage has gone up, food prices are sky high, the green levies are crippling me, and I'm expected to buy an electric car and scrap my perfectly good one. The whole net zero business will cost us, the taxpayers, a fortune. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look after our environment, but I believe net zero is turning into a money-making racket, one where you aren't allowed to really question the science for fear of being called a climate denier. I mean, the carbon footprint in getting a new car is huge. Now, we're now on COP27. They've had 26 of the damn things. And despite Zoom technology, which would save time, money, and more importantly, the climate, many of the world leaders are travelling there by private jet. And who's to say they're right? In 1988, it was predicted that the Maldives would be underwater by 2018. They're not. In 2009, Gordon Brown told the Economic Forum in London that negotiators had 50 days to save the world from global warming and break the impasse. Wrong. I mean, they've made so many predictions that they've got totally wrong, which only serves to prove how little they actually know about our planet. Is it just me? Or do you smell a rat as well? Right, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? Now, nurses are set to take part in the biggest strike action ever over a dispute about pay. The Royal College claimed that they have had enough support in order to go on strike this winter, which, with the results expected to be announced this week. But with record NHS waiting lists, we all know about that, bed blocking, severe ambulance waiting times, is it time? Is it the right time to go on strike? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. Iran admits supplying Russia with drones before the war in Ukraine began in February. And Moscow used these weapons recently to destroy Ukrainian infrastructure during the invasion. I'll be getting the latest from inside the war-torn country. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is considering to run in the US presidential race. I'll be finding out more from across the pond. Then at 5 in Outside, I'm very excited to say Lee John. Remember that? He was part of the acclaimed funk soul music group Imagination. Yes, it's just an illusion. He was the best known for his hit. That was a great track, wasn't it? They reached the top 10 3 times in the 80s. Now he's focusing his attention on documentaries, directing and producing a film looking at the history of black British music. He'll be live in the studio with me at 5. Do not miss that. That's on the way. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, also broadcast journalist and entrepreneur. And look at him, Danny Kelly.
Can I tell you how much an entrepreneur he is?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, please, Andrew.
I'm sorry, I heard him.
He was late to come in as well. He took a while.
He was wheeling and dealing on the phone about a car with somebody.
In the green room.
In the green room.
Security. He's a smashing lad. I know he's
Yes.
watching now. And we've negotiated a deal. Just need to get him through on finance.
Right.
Honestly.
But that's truly Thatcher. I admire it.
Thank you very
5 minutes
much.
spare, he's used it and he's done a deal.
Well, speaking of the cars, though, I mean, I bet second-hand cars are going for a right good old price because everyone wants to keep them, and those who are selling them will get a fortune out of them.
Nana, second-hand cars, there's a slump in the market. People aren't buying them unless they're...
Really?
Honestly, it's awful. Unless they're an essential purchase. The last 5 cars I've sold, 3 were to learner drivers, so they had to buy one. 1 was a replacement for a car that was stolen, and 1 was a replacement because a car was crashed. So they're essential purchases.
So
the used car market's awful.
No, really, really.
Awful.
Wonder what the electric car market's like.
Awful. Any car market, unless it's an essential purchase, awful.
Well, what do you...
It's too expensive?
Well, because people, if you don't have to spend, they're not spending.
Well, they're going to force us to spend, aren't they? This whole COP business. I mean, it's 27 of these things out
Did
there.
you know, I've got to be honest, when you said this is the 27th, before COP26, I can't say that I was consciously aware of any of the previous ones.
No, me
Isn't
neither.
that terrible? It's because we hosted it, so we got lots of publicity over it, and Alok Sharma, the cabinet minister who was seconded to run it, rather pompous, I thought he is, he's handing over now, but I thought, what did the other ones do?
Yeah, exactly.
And what can anybody remember what we declared in COP26, which was in Glasgow, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in Glasgow.
What did they do?
Do you know what it stands for?
No.
No, nor do I.
Well,
Nana!
Do I know what...
Climate.
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 Oh, planet.
Climate
gotta be...
unpredictable.
It just says it all, doesn't it? And actually, I'm with you. Sunak took a principled decision not to go.
Yeah.
He's got a major cost of living crisis to deal with here. The big financial statements on November the 17th, been delayed from October the 31st. It's clearly far more complicated and stuff to do than we thought. So he was going to stay back here. Instead, he's going off to Egypt, was it today? He'll be there for 2 or 3 days. And you're right. He changed his mind when he knew that man, Boris Johnson, the blonde bombshell,
He couldn't
was going
bear
to be
it.
there.
And actually, I had Stanley on my show, and I swear Stanley had a slight slip of the tongue when I said, because he sort of spoke in the future tense, will, as in the Boris will, but then he said, no, so maybe. I just thought I'd found something there. But then, literally, moments later, Boris then said he's going.
Yeah.
And then Rishi then declares that he's changing his mind.
Boris wants to be a major player.
Yeah.
And he committed this government to net zero, which I don't agree with. And Sunak's going on the same way. But, of course, there is one good reason that he can use COP26. I think there'll be a lot of hot air talk, pardon the pun. But Biden's there, so that's always a good chance to talk to the president. If the president remembers who he is, let alone who Sunak is.
Will he probably fall asleep?
Yeah. And, of course, Macron will be there, so he can really nail this guy about what's happening with the migrant crossings.
It is a terrible look. Nana alluded to these private jets. It's an awful look.
Why are they doing that?
It's a terrible look. Do you remember? I can't remember the name of the A-list actress. She lives in Hollywood. She's a Brit, and she flew over first class.
Emma Thompson.
Wow, she flew over first class to take part in Extinction Rebellion.
She did.
And she was holding she was holding one of those sort of non-recyclable, wax-covered.
It's mental.
Cups.
It's crazy.
And don't forget Meghan and Harry, the great eco-warriors. Often use private jets when they go to their environmental protests.
Apparently, I've heard it's a Bombardier private jet, which is one that goes to about 60,000 feet and emits loads of CO2, a massive carbon footprint. I mean, it beggars belief that they're going to lecture us and each other about saving the environment, having flown there when they could do this by Zoom.
And there'll be hundreds of officials there too, hundreds of press will be there. It's a great jamboree, and it's lasting 2 weeks.
I know.
What is the carbon footprint of COP27?
I know.
That would be a great story.
Well, that would be good, wouldn't
Somebody
it?
should measure it.
Well, Conference of the Parties is what it stands for. Conference
Is that
of the
COP?
Parties.
Well, that's you couldn't make that up.
No, you couldn't.
It is a big party.
I think there's a lot to be said, though, for eye-to-eye meetings. Nana's point about Zoom is a very valid one, but I think there's a lot to be said. For example, being an entrepreneur, as you call me, I'm a car dealer away from journalism, and it's easy to sell a car in principle over the phone. You can get a deposit off them, but when you're actually touching flesh and they're walking around the car and you're pointing out the benefits and the features, then it's easier to get a deal.
Well, no, but you can see the car, you can touch the car, you can feel the car. You cannot see CO2, right? So they don't need to feel the CO2 or touch it. They can talk to each other via Zoom. And you know what would be... And the thing is, it's self-defeating, isn't it? If you're going to talk about climate change, you need to set an example. You can't be flying there in a private jet and then telling other people how they need to...
That's
look,
right.
It just doesn't make sense. It's a very bad look.
But are you more likely to get a deal face-to-face? That's my point.
Well, we probably got a deal last year, but none of us can remember what it was.
But nobody did anything anyway. And they criticised people like China and others who didn't go. But actually, China didn't then extend their carbon footprint to go to this thing.
No.
And Keir Starmer was criticising, saying that, somebody should go. And yet it's like, well, actually, if we want to go with this carbon business, nobody should be going. It should be just done on Zoom.
Yeah, and it doesn't connect with... I would say it doesn't connect with the average man and woman in the street.
Well,
the average Daily Mail reader isn't bothered about it.
No, I agree. And we do know, don't we, absolutely, in this country and other countries, during the lockdown, which particularly the second one I didn't agree with, but during the lockdown, the warming of the planet went down a little because people weren't flying, they weren't on trains and planes and ships. So that's the evidence.
Yeah.
And we know there will be dozens of planes flying into Turkey in the next 2 weeks.
If they're serious.
And Biden will be Air Force One, and that will be about 20 cars in the security.
This
We've
one's
seen
in
them
Egypt,
before.
isn't it? This one's in
Egypt.
Yeah, but it is a bit of a turkey, isn't it, really, to be honest with you. There's just literally no point. They're going to do it, then they should do it via Zoom. They should all communicate that way.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't they shouldn't be annoyed about the bigger nations that aren't going, because actually by not going, you're doing a better thing than going. And they should reorganise it on Zoom. I just find it ridiculous.
He should have stuck to his guns.
Should have stuck to his guns.
Yeah, definitely.
Should have stuck to his guns, but he didn't. But then none of them do. No, see, that's sadly the way it is. Well, listen, stay with me. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? Now, nurses are set to take part in the biggest strike action ever over a dispute about wages. But with record NHS waiting lists, we've got things like bed blocking and severe ambulance waiting times. Should they go on strike? Send me your thoughts. What do you think? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet me at gbnews. There is a poll up right now asking that very question. Should nurses go on strike? Cast your vote, but first let's get an update with your weather.
Let's look then at this evening's weather, and the UK is looking blustery and showery as that rain continues to push in from the west. Let's home in on the detail. Starting off today in the southwest, and there'll be heavy showers through much of the evening, some thundery and blustery as well, clear spells though in between. Heading further east, and they're fairly dry, often clear skies to the end of the day, though a few passing showers possible later on. A blustery and showery evening for much of Wales, those showers feeding back in on the brisk southwesterly winds, which will also turn heavy and thundery at times. Some showers also likely across parts of the Midlands. Those should be less intense than further west, but some heavy ones are still possible, things turning drier throughout the night. And mostly dry for the northeast of England as well, with fewer showers reaching there. Some mist and fog patches, though, developing there. They could be dense. Clear skies, though, meaning it'll turn chilly overnight in the end. Plenty of showers across Scotland as well, those likely to be heavy around the central belt, but it will be drier towards the north and east. And a few showers likely for parts of Northern Ireland. Here it's going to turn dry, with clear spells for a time before rain arrives during the early hours of Monday. So the showers easing then for many overnight, with some dry weather before rain arrives from the west and the southwest later. And that's how this very mixed weather picture is shaping up into tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
So it's 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, don't forget, you can stream us live on YouTube. We are the People's Channel. Now, before the break, we were discussing COP27. I mean, 27 of them. Let's see what you've been saying. Francis says, the new meaning of net zero. The UK is bust, thanks to Boris and Rishi. I'll go with that. But then there were the ones before them as well. Remember, the Labour Party apparently left no money behind. Michael says it's one rule for one and one rule for another, preaching about cutting down energy uses, but they'll jump on private jets. Yeah, exactly. Ian says, so Rishi Sunak cops out and goes to COP27. No doubt he'll come back with his head full of big new ideas to save the planet, which will cost the taxpayer a fortune and ruin our power, self-sufficiency and economy even more. Yeah, well, I second all of that. I mean, it's just unbelievable. They shouldn't be going. They should focus on the economy. That's my view, but keep your thoughts coming. It's now time, though, for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? Now, the Royal College of Nursing have reportedly voted in favour of strike action, with more than 300,000 members taking part in a strike ballot, which is the biggest in the 106-year history of the union. Now, the ballot results are set to be revealed next week, but according to research commissioned by the Royal College of Nurses, nurses' salaries have fallen around about 20%, and that's in real terms. So if you imagine your income in real terms of falling by about a fifth, that's quite considerable. And that is in the UK since 2010. So they're basically working for the equivalent of 1 day a week for no pay at all, which is pretty much unacceptable. Now, NHS England data has also shown that in September, more than 13,000 patients a day were deemed ready to be discharged but were stuck in hospital beds. That's as nearly 400,000 patients are waiting over a year for treatment, and that's not to mention the severely long ambulance waiting times as well. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're able to house migrants, loads of them, those who've come over from the channel, spending 7 million a day, roughly. And for the people who are in this country, we're unable to sort of find a way of giving them somewhere to be whilst they've come out of hospital. It's abhorrent. Now, if the government at one point were willing to pour money into other areas, including tax cuts for the rich and hiring diversity managers for the NHS, why not pay our key health workers more? Do you remember the 45% rate that was going to come down to 40? That would save about, would have lost about 1.8 billion. They could have used that to increase the nurses' wages. So in this hour, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? I'm joined now by psychiatric nurse Julia Taylor. Julia, thank you very much for joining me. Julia, can I ask whether you voted to go on strike or not?
I haven't voted, but I'm not going on strike. Definitely not.
Why not, though? I mean, all the figures, your wages have fallen, a day literally extra in terms of how much you're paid. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Because the patients are going to be put at risk. Patients, when I say put at risk, I don't think anybody's going to leave anybody in dire straits. However, what you've got is people waiting for knee operations. People have been waiting for years for operations everywhere else. And sadly, the list's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If I go on strike one day, that's going to affect that. And it's going to make the list of patients waiting even longer than it already is. And as a nurse, sadly, they've got us over the barrel, really, because I don't feel I can strike because I don't want to let my patients down. And then this might sound a bit extreme, and I'd probably get shot down in flames for saying this, but would it not make us no better than just stop oil with the people that they're stopping getting to hospital because they're blocking roads? We're going to be standing outside, no, we're not going to work, we're not going to help you with your operation. We aren't going to do that. Sadly, I just can't. I can't strike. I can't bring myself to do it. And some of my colleagues are, and some of my colleagues aren't intending to strike. But personally, I just can't do it. It's not in my nature. I didn't join the NHS for money. Crikey Moses, if I'd wanted money, I'd have gone to the private sector and been an agency nurse. And Nana, do you know how much they spend on agency nurses every year? They could use that money to pay nurses more wages. It's 423.5 million a year on agency nurses. They get paid an absolute fortune. Sometimes you're working on a shift with somebody who's getting about £30 an hour more than you, and you're doing the hard work. And I think, because the government haven't managed this, I actually do think they're trying to run the NHS into the ground because I think they want to privatise it. I think that's what this is all about. But I still won't strike.
You still won't strike. You just stay right there, because I'm also joined now by political commentator Sam Dowler. Sam, thank you very much for joining me. You've heard what Julia said. She's a nurse. She won't support the strike. She won't strike. But you support the strikes. Why?
You know, it breaks my heart listening to her. That she's so right. Of course, no nurse would want to strike, and you know, the risk to any patients is awful and shocking. And the fact is that there's about 47,000 vacancies for nurses in this country, and that's obviously a huge problem. So if their pay was reflected the work they do, then maybe, you know, they might be able to hire more people, but at the moment it isn't. And, you know, it was literally a year ago in the pandemic when it was protect the NHS, outside on your front door, you know, banging on a saucepan. So why on earth are the government now saying that they can't have a decent pay rise, 5% over the interest rate? I mean, I don't think there's any question for it. Nobody, especially not nurses, would want to strike. But it is literally the last resort.
Well, bearing in mind that they have received a 3% pay rise, that's about £1,000 last year, despite the pay freeze, as well as NHS staff receiving a £1,400 pay rise this year as well. So they haven't gone without. But in principle, the fact that they're striking, I mean, you're saying that, but if you're the one that needs a nurse or a doctor and you're going to hospital and they're on strike, would you still support it?
Yes, absolutely. My father had cancer for a very long time, so I was in and out of hospitals for many years. And obviously, so I see the work firsthand. So as everybody does, and I don't think there are any patients that would categorically say, no, I don't think there should be a strike. And they're already saying that, of course, this won't affect A&E nurses, for example. So this is maybe, people might have to wait an extra hour, etc. But if it gets the job done and they get the pay rise that they deserve, they absolutely deserve it. My partner works in the care sector, and what they pay the care sector is absolutely shocking, even compared to what they pay nurses. And they don't feel they can strike either, because they don't want to let their patients down. It's exactly the same as your guests. So I mean, what else is there to do?
Well, let's bring Julia back on then, and you can speak to her yourself, because Julia seems to think that she doesn't want to strike because of the patients. She doesn't want them to get worse and get sicker because there's nobody to tend for them. Sam said, what else could you do if you couldn't strike? I mean, if you're not going to strike, Julia, what else is there for you?
Well, obviously, lobby the government, constantly write to your local MP, get on protests left, right and centre as often as possible. Big protests, though. Make our voices heard. And really, as much as I hate to say it, but I work for the NHS, the only way that this is going to be solved is to get the Tory government out. That is the way to solve it. They've caused this.
Well, you say that, but then, this whole situation, apparently this whole economic situation we find ourselves in is more to do with a global situation, supposedly. But also the NHS is they spend the money very badly, as far as I can see. Sam, what would you say to Julia's point that if they did strike, they'd just be like Just Stop Oil?
Well, obviously, Just Stop Oil is, it's an extreme example, but I do get your guest point completely. But I mean, this is, obviously it is, there is a global crisis, but in this country, I mean, it must be galling for nurses like yourself to see, I don't know, BP and Shell making the amount of profits they do and us not tax them, or, 44 billion wasted on PPE for the Tories' mates. I have to agree with your guests again and say that I think there should be a general election, because this is under the Tories government that this has fallen apart. So I mean, this is why I have to support the nurses, and I'm sure your guests as well, even though she isn't going to strike, but she will be supporting her friends and her partners who will do.
Well, it is a shame that it's come to this, but Sam, surely though, as I put it to you before, that if it was you who was sick and needed the care and there was nobody there for you, are you sure that you would feel the same way?
I've read a lot about this and watched a lot about this. People, nurses aren't going to be turning their backs on their patients. They're not going to be doing that. It's going to be organised in a correct way. Of course, they're withdrawing work. That is what a strike is all about. But then there is obviously so many jobs and stuff that they won't do, but looking after the patients isn't going to be one of them. I don't think patients will be put at risk, and I don't think nurses would do that. That is the point of their jobs.
Well, okay, but yeah, you say that, but it's interesting you say, because basically then there's something organised, isn't there? So it's not quite on strike, is it? They are still able to tend to you, and that's the point. If they couldn't go on strike, would you support a situation where they're not allowed to strike, but they're paid, say, in line with inflation or something like that? Would you support that premise, that they're not allowed to strike? There are professions where you cannot strike.
Yeah. I would, definitely, as long as we were in line with inflation. I don't like the idea of being told we can't strike, because we live in a democracy, so they say, and obviously we should be allowed to do things, not to the extreme. I think we should just work to rule and finish on time, have our dinner when we're supposed to. That would cause mayhem. Actually, it really would, because half the time we finish a bit late, we start early, we do more work than we should. And if we just stop all of that, it would be a disaster in a day if everybody did it.
Well, listen, thank you both for your thoughts. Really good to speak to both of you. You know, what you said is definitely food for thought. Julia Taylor, thank you so much. And also Sam Dowley is a political commentator. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with our Great British Debate, and I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Then stay with me, because at 5 o'clock it's Outside Music and Lee John. He was part of the acclaimed funk soul music group Imagination. They were best known for that incredible track, Just an Illusion. The music legend has now turned his attention to the documentary making, and he's producing a film about black history and music. You won't want to miss that. That's on the way. He will be live here in the studio at 5. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
34 minutes past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The leader of the Liberal Democrats has branded the Conservative Party incompetent and morally bankrupt. In a speech to the party conference, Sir Ed Davey blamed the UK's rising cost of living on Russia's war in Ukraine and criticised the government's attempts to tackle the issue. He called for a stronger windfall tax on energy giants, higher taxes on banks, and said it was time for a general election.
Put a proper windfall tax on the blood oil profits of the fossil fuel giants. Reverse your tax cuts for the big banks. They are unfair and unnecessary, and use those extra billions to give people real help with energy bills, to protect pensions and benefits from inflation, to safeguard schools, hospitals and councils from cuts, and to help homeowners struggling to pay that Conservative property penalty.
Alok Sharma has opened COP27 in Egypt by urging world leaders to take concrete steps to tackle global warming, saying inaction will lead to a climate catastrophe. The president of COP26, which was hosted last year in Glasgow, warned the world is still not on track to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees. Tanzania's state media says at least 19 people have been killed after a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria. Rescue boats, emergency workers and bystanders have been helping pull passengers to safety. 26 have been rescued so far. Local media reporting the plane was trying to land in the city of Bukoba in stormy weather. The country's president has called for calm as the rescue operation continues. The Prime Minister has announced an extra bank holiday to mark the King's coronation next year. The holiday will take place on Monday, the 8th of May, after His Majesty's coronation on the previous Saturday. Rishi Sunak says he looks forward to seeing people come together to celebrate and pay tribute to King Charles III. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana in just a moment.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? The Royal College of Nursing has reportedly voted in favour of strike action, with more than 300,000 members taking part in a ballot. Now, the research that was commissioned by the Royal College of Nurses indicates that nurses' salaries have actually fallen by 20%. So in real terms, that would be roughly 1 day equivalent extra work. So they're literally losing a day's worth of pay. However, as the NHS suffers from record waiting lists, I'm sure lots of us are on them, and huge delays in ambulance waiting times. I've seen that somebody was waiting for 2 days for an ambulance, which is ridiculous. Is it really right for them to go on strike? What do you think? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should nurses go on strike? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, also broadcaster and journalist, Danny Kelly. Andrew, I'm going to start with you. The nurses going on strike, does that work for you? Do you think that's...
It's, with the heaviest heart, I have to say I can't agree with it because we all admire them. They do a fantastic job. They're not paid enough. I don't know why they're paid on average £30,000 in a GP who doesn't work at weekends, doesn't do late nights either, gets on average about £110,000. There's been a real... successive governments, not just Tory governments, it was much the same under Labour, under Blair and Brown. They've exploited nurses' loyalty too much. So I'd say no, but I'd say that the pay rise they get has to match inflation, and we can pay the doctors, pay them a bit less, because if GPs went on strike, frankly, now a lot of your viewers watching would say, we wouldn't know the difference, because we can't get an appointment, we can't get them to answer the phone, and if you do answer the phone, they just say ring 111, so how much would we notice? But if nurses go on strike, they work 365 days of the year, 24/7, it's going to have a material impact on people's health. It could lead to all sorts of unforeseen consequences. People could die, operations to be cancelled. And something they could do, the government too, I was just looking at the figures. Steve Barclay's the health secretary. He's new at the job. He did an audit which showed how many thousands more bureaucrats have been taken on by the NHS since 2013.
It's ridiculous.
Thousands and thousands. Something called Integrated Care Boards has 26,000 of them. 18,600. They have no work in medical areas. They're paid enormous salaries. So the cost of bureaucracy is soaring. We could do with fewer of them. I'd put a freeze on non-medical hiring in the NHS. And can anybody tell me why we have to pay a diversity manager £115,000 a year when a nurse gets paid £30,000? Don't need them anyway. It's one of the most diverse employers in the world.
Net zero, diversity managers, all gone.
And also, the two guests, and my heart goes out to that lady, the psychiatric nurse, because she doesn't want to strike. Now, I don't know how much that lady's on. It's none of my business, but Andrew's right. The median salary is, say, I think 32k. The starting salary, I think, is 27k, and there are bands and increments, 2 or 3 grand around those figures. She's putting her patients before her mortgage payments, which I find admirable. I really do. The fact that she didn't take part in the ballot confused me a little, because she should have really, in my opinion, she should have voted no. She should have strengthened the no side. But it's easy just to throw mud at Conservatives. It really is. No matter... It's true, though, isn't it? I was driving down today, there was a car crash. If those two were asked about it, the bloody Conservatives caused it.
Well, excuse me, sorry.
Forgive the language. Forgive the language. The Conservatives caused it.
To say that.
What they needed, what they should remember is back in 1997, John Major, just before he got booted out by Tony Blair, John Major came up with an idea, PFI, Private Finance Initiative, I think. And basically, the gist of this was that businessmen and women are better at running big businesses like the NHS than mandarins in Whitehall. So what they did, they farmed it all out. And if you do a simple search on PFI, billions of pounds, it's estimated, billions of pounds have been flushed down the drain. Taxpayer cash, because we are now paying business people to run our hospitals. So much so, and your paper, Andrew, has had so many scoops over the years, so much so that these PFI people may charge someone £20 for a pack of paracetamol.
I know, it's bad.
And the people who say it's the Conservatives' fault need to remember that in 1997 it was crystallised by Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. That's correct.
Yeah, it was the concept of
Goes
John
back
Major,
25 years.
But it was implemented by Brown in particular.
Correct.
And we're lumbered now with projects all over the country which are being run on PFIs, which are billions of pounds over budget, and that is a direct consequence of what was going on there. So all parties have
that's correct. But to answer your question, Nana, should the NHS, should the nurses go on strike, I agree with Andrew. I think it would be awful. That lady, it's a vocation for that woman. It's not a job. It's a vocation first and it's a job second. That's why she's not going on strike, and that's why I admire her. But also listening to the other guy, his point is that unless you take direct action, and don't forget inflation is 12%, they want 5%. On top of that, 17%. It's the biggest employer in the UK, the NHS.
One of the biggest in Europe.
Correct. Now, who's going to be next? The teachers? The firefighters?
Yeah, but the amount of money they're wasting, though, this is the problem. Whilst we think, there's a lot of money, they were prepared to drop the high rate of tax from 45 to 40%. They were prepared to lose 1.8 billion, which I hear would have been almost enough to cover the increase in the nurses' wages. They are prepared to spend millions housing people from all over the world, or other parts of the world in particular, as we know, with the whole issue with the Channel. We're spending fortunes on that as well. The bed blocking situation, they're spending a fortune housing, putting people in different places to pay for that. The management, the procurement of medicines is really expensive. The whole thing is so badly managed. They are wasting money. And I'm really angry that they expect us as taxpayers to come in and sup up these gaps. Really, they need to reorganise the NHS. The other week, there was a Public Accounts Committee meeting, and Amanda Pritchard was there. She's the head of NHS England. And when they asked who was in charge of the NHS, she sort of said she is, and then she sort of went, oh, but then it depends on this, that and the other. And it was just... And when she talked about the different layers of bureaucracy and the levels of this and the ICS and the ICSs and the IC, it was like, oh my God, this is a triangle that's tilting like this, and the hierarchy at the very top are the widest part of the triangle. But the people who really matter, nurses, doctors, and those nearer the bottom, that's where the management, that's where the money needs to be. That's the shape of the triangle, not that way up.
And the NHS is such a giant, it could have such huge power in its procurement programme, because if they procured for the entire NHS, they would get much better prices because, if you bulk buy...
Economies of scale.
Economies of scale.
Absolutely.
Instead, you've got all these trusts going off different ways doing their own thing. And neighbouring trusts next door to each other paying 10 times what the other trust is paying for a basic service. It's madness.
Well, Mark Francois, he was there. He was part of one of the people on the panel. And he was there. And he kind of said, well, he tried to get a meeting with, I think it was about 6 of the heads of the different trusts in the Essex area. He tried to get a meeting with them all. And literally, one of them was ill, another one pulled out. The day before, no one came to the meeting in the end. And these are the heads of these trusts. He wanted to get them all together to talk about, the whole situation, the procurement and everything else like that. It was very difficult to get that meeting. And the problem with the NHS is there doesn't seem to be anybody who's accountable for anything. So if you want to try and find out, well, who do I speak to about this? They say, oh, go over there, or is that person there? There's so many layers that the real people who matter are those who are working within it at the lower end of it, looking after the patients, and they seem to have forgotten about those people.
But what we know, whatever happens, Danny, sorry, just say briefly, if the nurses go on strike, it's going to make it so much worse. Even more bed blocking, even more cancelled operations, and sadly, people will die.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
But to look at it from their perspective, we were talking about how bloated it is and how many bureaucrats on 6-figure salaries. That isn't going to pay off the increased mortgage for that woman in Middlesbrough next month, is it? She needs something to happen now in order for her to put food on the table for her family and pay next month's mortgage. The problem that you've highlighted about bloated and bureaucracy and 6-figure salaries, that's going to take years to resolve.
Well, I don't think it should take years. I think it could be resolved much more quickly by pretty much firing all the net zero managers, getting rid of all the diversity inclusion, and just getting on with putting the money where it should be, which is to the actual patient care and to those who are looking after the patients. But if you've just joined me, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. We're should we go? Should we go to Milton Keynes?
Very nice.
Milton Keynes, you know, the home of the roundabout. So have you been there?
I have. I got lost there.
I know, you would do.
I was pursuing Mrs. Thatcher.
Were you?
In a car with a photographer. We lost the Iron Lady.
No.
On one of the many roundabouts in Milton Keynes.
Well, let's speak to Seshni, Dr. Seshni Mulia. She's there in Milton Keynes. Seshni, OK, so what do you think of this then? Because I know you're a doctor, so you work within this sort of environment. What's your view?
Good evening, Nana. Thank you for having me on. Yes, I say it with such a heavy heart that the nurses should not go on strike. As you've heard from Andrew, Danny and the psychiatric nurse in Middlesbrough, nurses play an important part in the NHS. They're the driving force and they are the ones that are working 24/7 to keep the NHS running and to ensure patient care. But if nurses go on strike, we are definitely going to have a huge concerns in terms of the long waiting list we already have, cancelled outpatient appointments, cancelled surgeries, and a lot of other issues that are going on in the NHS. And as Andrew said, you know, it can affect patients to the extent that some patients can end up dying. So it is going to affect a lot of patient care if nurses go on strike. But on the other hand, and I must say, I do understand working with nurses, you know, we value them so much. And especially during the pandemic, they've done brilliant work to keep people alive and to help them during the pandemic. But they do need an increase in their salary, you know, especially in terms of the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis that we are going through. So I would urge, you know, the government needs to meet the demands of the nurses. You know, the Royal College of Nursing, about 300,000 nurses have said that they want to strike. And, you know, as I said, I say it with such a heavy heart. They should not go on strike, but at the same time, we need to meet their demands.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, Seshni. What's that behind you? The Millennium Dome? There's not one in Milton Keynes. What's going on with your background?
That London Eye.
The London Eye. I was going to say,
yeah.
you're in Milton Keynes. Seshni, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That's our great British voice. It's very scenic out there, doesn't it? Lovely. It's a bit like my background.
There was a Millennium Wheel in Milton Keynes. There are quite a few Millennium Wheels around,
There isn't one in Milton Keynes. Our background is a bit like my background.
I didn't think Milton Keynes was where all those roundabouts were.
No, it is.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry.
Trust me.
Was it Milton Keynes? I think it was where, like, not Swindon.
Redditch?
No.
Not roundabouts in Redditch. You know Redditch more than anyone.
It's Milton Keynes.
There are honestly, I forgot which general
Keynes?
election it was, and we were meant to be interviewing Mrs. Thatcher. We lost. We were meeting at a roundabout. There are about 19 of them. They all look the same.
They all look the same. They do, and they all look the same. It's a grid system. They love triangles and rectangles, and yeah, Milton Keynes. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it's time for Worldview. And Iran admits that they've been supplying Russia with drones before the war in Ukraine began. That was in February. That's when it supposedly happened. Moscow used them to destroy Ukrainian infrastructure. I'll be getting the latest from inside that war-torn country. That's on the way. Don't forget as well, Lee John will be here just around about 5 o'clock in my wonderful... I'm looking forward to meeting him. He's from that fabulous band, Imagination. He'll be back after this.
A lovely smile.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
It is fast approaching 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. We are live on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget, you can also download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua, and it is time for Worldview. And first off, we're going to head over to the United States of America to talk to Paul Doddridge all about Donald Trump. Paul, welcome. Really good to talk to you. Now, Paul, Donald Trump, it's coming. It's the midterms, isn't it? This is what we're heading to this time now. What's going on in America at the moment?
Well, it's like, for people on my side of the fence, it's like the night before Christmas. Tuesday are the midterm elections. That's going to be the entirety of the House of Representatives, and 1/3 of the Senate are up for election on the federal level. Donald Trump has been advised, if he is going to announce, to not announce before the midterm election. So he is itching to take responsibility and to take, take credit for what looks like a red wave. And the Republicans are red here, which is always baffles me. But anyway, the Republicans are red. It looks like a red wave on Tuesday. Donald Trump was advised not to take credit before and to keep his powder dry. It looks like he's going to announce on the 14th of November that he will be formally announcing his candidacy for the President of the United States again. And the thing, it's almost like the first cuckoo of spring. The reason we know this is today he branded Ron DeSantis, he branded him Ron DeSanctimonious, and he only says these kind of things. He only makes up these nicknames for political rivals. And, you know, we had Crooked Hillary, we had Low Energy Jeb Bush, we had Lion Ted Cruz, Little Marco Rubio, Sleepy Joe Biden. That's it now. We have, take it to the bank. Him calling Ron DeSantis Ron DeSanctimonious means that that is basically him declaring that he is running for president again in 2024.
Now, isn't there a chance that both houses will end up being Republicans, so the Senate and Congress will both end up being Republicans? So if that happens, all this, the subpoena for him to come and speak and everything, that he will get out of all of that?
Yes, in short, there's a very good chance. Listen, I'm pretty much 100% certain that the House of Representatives will go Republican. It doesn't look any way possible for Democrats to hold on to control of the House. The Senate's not as easy. The Senate is taken statewide, and so you have lots of other communities. You know, as we had during the election, you're waiting for agricultural communities, outlying communities, mixing with suburban and urban communities, their whole vote. That's the Senate. And so it isn't a given that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. But with the underperforming of many of the Democrat candidates, it does look like we will end up with a 1 or 2 seat majority in the Senate as well, which means that if you ever thought that Joe Biden was a lame duck up till now, after this election, you will actually see a genuine lame duck in the White House. And so, I mean, his own friends are turning on him. It's ridiculous. What's more interesting for Trump fans like me is that finally the vote counting and the vote collaboration and the voting systems are going to be in the hands of MAGA Republicans. There are 3 of the 300 vote denying, let's call them election denying candidates running. Every single one of the election denying candidates is currently leading in the polls. And that's really significant for next time round, because they're going to be responsible for actually collating the next election. So if Trump runs and Trump wins again, this time he'll actually be allowed to take the seat in the White House.
I think he'll win. Paul, thank you very much. It's really good to talk to you again. That's Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. Right, next, let's head over to Ukraine to get the latest from the war. Now, Iran has said that they did supply a small amount of drones to Russia a few months before the war began, and these drones have been used to destroy Ukrainian infrastructure and disrupt the lives of everyday people. Joining me to talk about this and or loads more is Russian expert Danny Armstrong. Danny, so talk to me about this. The drones, they've admitted it now. Talk to me about the strikes as well and Iran admitting to supplying them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as we spoke about those Iranian drones supplied to Russia before on your show, Nana, Iran, the foreign ministry finally admitting that they did supply those drones to Russia. But there's a catch. Of course, there's always a catch with things like this. Iran saying it supplied those drones months before the war and didn't supply them for explicit use in the Ukrainian invasion. But as we see the geopolitical landscape, as it was unfolding months before February 24th, which was the day of the invasion, if Iran was supplying drones back then, of course, it raises questions, why did Russia need them? And what were they for? Of course, as we saw, there were rumours and there was a big feeling that Russia was planning for an invasion. It seems a little bit unbelievable that Iran would not have any inkling of that in supplying those drones. As we've seen, they have struck energy grids and civilian settlements. I do believe that we would have had somebody on the show to talk about that, but the reason we can't get in touch with her is because she doesn't have any electricity this on a Sunday, as these strikes put more pressure on energy grids and civilian settlements affecting day-to-day life. Now, what the big effect of these drones do have, they have a big psychological effect. I was speaking to somebody in Ukraine, in Kiev, not long ago, and he said even if his apartment was hit in central Ukraine, and he says when he's walking down the street and he hears anything, it could be a motorcycle coming down the street, he has a flashback to his apartment being bombed. It really has had that effect on everyday life in Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainian response to those admissions by Iran is the fact that they said that these are lies, even with the admission. It's a lie that Iran supplied only a few drones, as it's admitted to. Zelensky has called for tougher sanctions on Iran in a meeting with European Council head Ursula von der Leyen today. And it looks like, it looks like the Iran has admitted, but Ukraine not accepting that admission and saying it's pretty much all lies. They were much more involved in supplying weapons to Russia.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for that. That's Danny Armstrong. He's a Russian correspondent. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. So good afternoon, it's just gone 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Still to come in this week's Outside, I'll be talking to legendary musician Lee John. Some of you might know him from the group Imagination with their hit single Just an Illusion. Stay tuned for that one. You won't want to miss it. And for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The government has announced that a pilot scheme to reduce the backlog in asylum seekers will be rolled out nationwide by 2023. The Home Office says an 8-week test run reduced the time asylum seekers waited for a first interview by around 40%. Almost 100,000 migrants are currently waiting for a decision on their asylum claims. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says this will speed up the process. The government could revive the British Bill of Rights in a bid to tackle the number of migrants crossing the English Channel. The legislation would give UK courts supremacy over the European Court of Human Rights and prevent judges in Strasbourg from interfering in government policy. That includes sending migrants to Rwanda for processing. The bill was shelved by former Prime Minister Liz Truss, but Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says its return would end the, quote, abuse of UK law. The government says it has contingency plans in place if nurses go on strike amid a growing threat of industrial action in the NHS. The Royal College of Nursing is expected to announce this week that its members have, for the very first time, voted in favour of national strike action in their dispute over pay. More than 300,000 members have been balloted, the biggest ever in the union's history. The walkouts are set to take place within a few weeks and are likely to cause disruption to operations and appointments. The Prime Minister will pledge to make the UK a clean energy superpower when he addresses the COP27 summit tomorrow, urging all countries to move away from fossil fuels. He'll warn that tackling global warming is fundamental to future prosperity and security. Mr. Sunak will also argue that Russia's invasion of Ukraine highlights the need to move to cheaper and cleaner sources of energy. Meanwhile, COP26 President Alok Sharma opened this year's summit by urging world leaders to act before there is a climate catastrophe.
How many more wake-up calls do world leaders actually need? A third of Pakistan underwater, the worst flooding in Nigeria in a decade. This year, the worst drought in 500 years in Europe, in 1,000 years in the US, and the worst on record in China.
National Highways has secured a High Court order to ban Just Stop Oil protesters from disrupting traffic on the M25. The order states that anyone entering the motorway, attaching themselves to any object or structure on it or assisting others can be held in contempt of court. Protesters could face imprisonment, an unlimited fine and the seizure of assets. The leader of the Liberal Democrats has branded the Tory party incompetent and morally bankrupt. In a speech to the party conference, Sir Ed Davey blamed the UK's rising cost of living on Russia's war in Ukraine. He also criticised the government's attempts to tackle the issue. He called for a stronger windfall tax on energy giants, higher taxes on banks, and said it was time for a general election.
Put a proper windfall tax on the blood oil profits of the fossil fuel giants. Reverse your tax cuts for the big banks. They are unfair and unnecessary, and use those extra billions to give people real help with energy bills, to protect pensions and benefits from inflation, to safeguard schools, hospitals and councils from cuts, and to help homeowners struggling to pay that Conservative property penalty.
In international news, Tanzania's state media says at least 19 people have been killed after a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria. 43 people were believed to be on board. 26 have been rescued so far. Emergency workers and bystanders have been helping to pull passengers to safety. Precision Air is Tanzania's largest privately owned airline. Local media reports the plane was trying to land at the city of Bukoba in stormy weather. And finally, the Prime Minister has announced an extra bank holiday to mark the King's coronation next year. The holiday will take place on Monday, the 8th of May, after His Majesty's coronation on the previous Saturday. Rishi Sunak says he looks forward to seeing people come together to celebrate and pay tribute to King Charles III. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, there's a raid happening and it's potentially on our pensions. Rishi and his Chancellor, Mr Hunt, you've got to be careful with that one, said that they would ensure those with the widest shoulders should carry the heaviest burden, which begs the question why they believe that to be the squeezed middle class. Basically, there is no money left and they can't print out any more like they did in the olden COVID days, which is part of the reason why we're in this mess. And even then, they failed to spend our money wisely. Remember the pandemic? Track and trace, where it was reported they shelled out almost £30 billion. It didn't even work properly. Remember all the different versions they had of it? It was useless. They shook the magic money tree to pay for people to stay in their homes, but they kept shaking it even when it was clear that they needed to stop. They cost us even more. And where the money landed, they appeared to lose the appetite to recoup it, like, for example, many of the bounce-back loans which bounced off the face of the earth. And what about the PPE? Sadly, the global trade market means that we don't actually make much here anymore. So when the global supply chains dried up, we had to pay extortionate amounts for it. I can remember a shipment we were waiting for from Turkey, which turned out to be just that. I mean, it would be funny if people weren't losing their lives, some potentially catching COVID due to the lack of protection from it. Now, the latest plan to make up for what I believe is financial mismanagement is a suggested pension grab of £10 billion. And last night, the Prime Minister and his Chancellor met with officials to apparently discuss this alongside a load of other measures. Before you dare to raid our pensions of hard-working folk, stop wasting our money. Windfall the companies that benefited from the pandemic, like Amazon and all those ones. Policies people like the supermarkets and other companies. Reduce the civil service and scrap HS2. That will come close to plugging the gap. Why should we pay for their financial mismanagement? So what do you think? Send me your thoughts. You know the coup. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. But here's what else is coming up today. Each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learnt and what comes next on the outside. And today, I'll be joined by Lee John. Now, he was part of the acclaimed funk soul group Imagination, who were well known for that fabulous track, Just an Illusion. I mean, that was so good. You could literally tell the track within just 2 beats, literally 1 beat. So we'll be focusing on all of that stuff, the attention that he's paying to documentaries, he's directing and producing a film looking at the history of black British music. He'll be live in the studio with me in a couple of moments' time. You won't want to miss it. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? HS2 is the government's attempt at levelling up. Now, the new line is aimed to connect the north and the south of England. And a report has suggested that the Birmingham to Manchester route is likely to reach £40 billion in cost by 2040. Now, that's almost double the original figure. Now, this all comes as Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is attempting to fill a £50 billion black hole through tax increases. So what do you think? Should the government simply scrap HS2 altogether? Email me your thoughts as ever, you know the coup, or tweet me @GBNews. Now, of course, it's time for Outside. Now, Lee John was part of the acclaimed funk soul group Imagination, who are well known for that fabulous song, Just an Illusion, and loads more, by the way. Outside of the band, Lee has excelled and prospered throughout his career, collaborating with numerous musicians over the years, notably appearing as a guest artist on the newly released Gorillaz album. Here is a clip from one of his most recent songs featuring Plastic Bertrand. Sorry, I can't sing, you don't hear me. And during his time away from music, Lee has focused his efforts on producing, directing various documentaries, and he's currently working on Flashback. That was actually one of their songs. It's just an illusion. Flashback, oh no, that's another song. Did you sing Flashback? Flashback, in the days when the times were, yeah. I can't sing. Oh, sorry, he's here now. I've done it. Anyway, Lee, he's here in the studio.
Yeah.
Lee, lovely to meet you.
Lovely
Fabulous.
to meet you, Nana.
Fabulous.
I like the colours, we're all in.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, thinking we did it.
Everyone's day today.
You always wear a hat.
I do. It's been quite a while now.
Why?
Well, style.
Is it?
It's for style.
Yeah.
It's my look, you know?
Yeah, that's
a long time.
That's what you'd look like without that. You wouldn't take it. Don't take that out. Oh, yeah, it's great.
I look too young.
You do. You look very young, actually. So you were born in, shall I say,
1845.
Yeah, 1957, which makes you old. You're not that old.
I'm 40 plus fat.
Wow, you're looking so good. So talk to me. Take me back to the days of Imagination.
The nights were young.
Then the days when the nights were young.
Flashback. Well, we started in the early 80s. For those who don't know about Imagination, we started in the early 80s. I was part of a force of Brit funk different bands and acts, you know, the Central Line, Light of the World, David Grant and Lynx, Junior Giscombe, Jackie Graham, a lot of us.
Jackie Grant, oh God.
Yeah,
round and around and around.
Yeah, we were all different, all individual, all uniquely dressed differently, and that was the style, because we used to go to this whole club scene, And that's how we kind of started. I was working in pubs and clubs and bingo halls and stuff, and learning my trade, and did acting and writing a lot. I've always been writing. So my first song I wrote was Body Talk.
Body Talk.
Which was...
Body Talk.
She's going to sing. I'm glad you're saying that, because I have to plug it now. You're going to get in February a 40th anniversary 17-album box set of Imagination hits, all the hits, all the albums, plus a lot of unreleased recordings, some very special gems on there, some live recordings, and some my jazz album. I did a jazz album, which is on there. So it's a really big package. And following up with that, we're going to be at the Shepherd's Bush Empire May the 20th for a 40th anniversary show with one of the bands I just talked about, Central Line. So next year is going to be 2020 Lee.
2020 Lee, I like it.
2020 Lee.
So what happened then? Because the band, you were amazing. You were so good.
We still are.
Yeah, so you're all still together, are you? Still performing?
We're not still together, because I haven't really worked with them since the 80s. But I mean, they're all doing, you know, Errol was a great drummer. Ashley was a very multi-musician. He actually went on to do work with Desiree.
Okay, Desiree.
Yeah, You Gotta Be Bad.
Yeah.
No. That's
the other one.
That's
Gabrielle.
Exactly.
Yeah, Desiree,
exactly.
I gotta be.
You see, you're getting the wrong song.
Well, they're so good though, but
well,
they're very similar.
British black music, which leads me on to Flashback.
In the days when I've got to stop.
Which is the history of UK black music. I've been working on it for quite a while. We're close to finishing it off. It's taken, oh my God, nearly a decade to do. Over 100 artists, over 800-900 hours. It starts from the turn of the century. So we trace the origin of British black music from Africa, classical, which was the pop of the day, into the jazz era, into the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 21st century. But it's a long piece. But in between that, I've done a documentary which I just finished about St. Lucia, which is my journey there, because that's where my parents come from, St. Lucia.
Had you sort of gone back there much during your time, or was it just
in 2019? I was there twice. I was doing the Roots and Soul Festival.
Was that like one of the first times you've been back, or do you go back a lot? No.
I've been there quite a while. It's just a very beautiful country. The Caribbean in a whole is beautiful. You know, and each island has something very, very good to represent and give the world. And St. Lucia, you know, I like my coconut water and my
lovely. So do I.
And
so expensive here, though, isn't it?
No, in St. Lucia it's like 40 the pound or 5 the pound, so it's very cheap.
I thought you could just crack a coconut open and just put a straw in and just drink.
Oh, over here it's expensive.
Yeah, here it's expensive.
Here everything's expensive here.
Yeah, tell me about it.
But, you know, so I've done this documentary, and it basically, through my eyes, I interviewed people who live there, embrace there, musicians who also are doing really well on an international platform. So that's one of the documentaries. I've done 3 documentaries for SOS Children, because I'm a patron for them. We went to Zambia, Tunisia, South Africa. And so the charity is very close, one of the charities that's close to my heart. I'm also involved with Voyage Youth in East London. And so I've been doing various different things, and we are touring next year. We're touring and doing a lot of tours next year.
So is it only your songs that you can sing on this tour? Do you sing some of the older hits that you did with the band? Or?
I do all the hits and more.
Hits,
And I do a little bit of my jazz, I do some funk, I do some... So you got to come to the show.
What can you play then? Can you play all the different instruments?
I can play little keyboards. You know, I produce, I direct, I tap dance.
Well, where's your tap shoes? Don't make any noise on this carpet.
No, I mean, basically, you know, when you come to an Imagination show, a Lee Jones show, it's to enjoy yourself. And right now we need upliftment, we need positivity, and that's what I give to you. Like the songs, you know, they're part of our heritage, our history, our youth, and also for the new audiences. Plus, since I did the Gorillaz track, The Lost Chord, I've been getting new audiences as well. They're discovering Lee John, so it's really cool.
Well, I was very shocked that when I said to one of my producers, Imagination, they haven't got a clue. I'm like, because they're young.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like half my age. I'm like, what? That was back in the day. How could you not know Imagination?
Music and Lights.
Exactly, Music and Lights.
It's on the box set. It's all going to be on the box set. And many, many different mixes, so it's going to be... And the younger people are actually embracing what I'm doing because, like, for example, I have a huge DJ following.
Oh, yeah.
Really big DJ. So all of the younger DJs, because I did a lot of dance records, so they're all coming in. And I had a hit recently with Victor Simonelli, Feel So Good. Feel so good, feel so good. So that was a very big dance record recently.
I could hear the voice. Because it's kind of whispery, silky, but it's got that sound.
Well,
got a very
I'm trying to
unique
keep
voice.
it going. I'm trying to keep it going, you know.
Yeah.
So
it must be interesting though, because Imagination were huge. So did you get to tour around the world?
I've been touring around the world since 1981. I haven't stopped.
What's it like? And do you get paid a lot for doing that? You must get paid a lot for doing that.
We don't talk cash on TV.
No, but it's yes or no, isn't it? Yeah.
No, the situation is, for me, it's been a great experience because in travelling and touring, I have been, like I talked about, 3 different countries. I talked about Tunisia, Algeria, South Africa. I've been to so many different places and actually seeing different people's cultures. What I tend to do when I travel is go there maybe a couple of days before the shows, so I can embrace the culture of the country that the people I'm going to be performing to. Because I think it's important that, you know, you do that before. I said tour, go there, come in on the flight and out. You don't see anything, you don't understand anything.
That's true.
So what I tend to do, I make it a must that I go there earlier. I can see how they eat, what they eat, how they dress, because I love the fashions and stuff, and understand the different cultures. And that's how you know how the world is turning.
Well, it's true. It's true.
And that, to me, is an important factor, which we don't do enough of. You know,
No,
especially as artists, because the promoters bring you over there and you're in and out so quickly. So I make sure I go there a little bit earlier. Even if it's a place I've been to before, like I go to France a lot. I have a huge French following, which has taken me to Africa, South America, North America, the Benelux territories, Côte d'Ivoire.
Oh,
I was doing, Côte d'Ivoire. I did I was performing on the X Factor there.
Really?
Yeah, and it's very, very different. It's like, it's a huge black experience.
So when you were performing there, you were working with the team at the X Factor to do a performance there?
Yeah. I was also, I was a judge. And I was also a designer, gave me some different outfits and stuff like that. And it was very different to over here, how they do the whole show.
I didn't realise the X Factor is out there as well.
In many different,
I didn't realise
every country now has their own reality show.
Is it actually the same one, the Simon Cowell version of it, but just
it's different?
So it's a different company doing the whole thing.
But they all do. You know, they've seen what we do,
and they're just literally replicating it.
Exactly, replicate it so that they can get new talent up and coming. Same thing in South Africa.
What do you make of some of the new talent that's coming out now? I mean, if you were to
I
pick
like
some
Little
of the
Mix, Little Sims. Little Sims. Yeah, I like her.
Yeah.
There are a few that I like, and I'm collaborating with a few younger ones as well to try and get their blood.
You know, you should collaborate with Dua Lipa or someone like that. Yeah, have you heard of Dua Lipa? She's fantastic. Because you're particular, she does some really nice sort of dance tracks, but I think, you know, some of your older stuff you could put in there.
Well, if she's listening to me,
Dua Lipa.
you know, email me and maybe we can do something
Even Rita
together.
Ora, you'd be great with Rita Ora.
Could be, yeah. I mean, there are some, you know, everything changes so quickly nowadays. So all of a sudden someone's in vogue and then they're not. 6 weeks later, you don't hear about them anymore.
But you've stayed in vogue, you have.
Well,
and
now,
it's tough,
40 years later,
How have you managed to keep yourself current now? Obviously, lots of collaborations, but, you know, your band and your sound is literally ingrained in my DNA.
Well, I don't really know. I think, for example, each decade I've kind of done something with a new DJ. I had a big garage record, Mind, Body and Soul. Do you remember that with DJ Fantasy? I had a huge hit with David Morales in the late 80s, Instinctual. And then we had recently with Victor Seminelli, and I've got a duet coming up with a South American 2-time Grammy Award-winning artist called George Vasillo.
Wow.
It's really huge. So I think the collaborations have kept me in that way. Plastic Bertrand is huge in Europe. Everybody knows him. Yeah. And the song you just played, Don't Stop the World from Turning, which was, to me was very relevant.
That's lovely, isn't it? So listen, if people want to get this track or whatever, remind us what it's called and where you're playing next.
Well, if you go to my website, www.leejohn.com with 3 E's.
Lee.
3 E's. Everything is on there. You can book tickets to our show coming up in May the 20th, and also the box set. Pre-order it now because it's 17 albums. I'm getting like you now. 17 albums in this box set, which has got some fantastic music on there. All the albums that Imagination did, Night Dubbing, Body Talk, the Scandalous albums.
Everything's there.
Everything's in, plus a lot.
Well, I hope I get a signed one, Lee.
You will. You definitely will.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me,
I really
Nana.
appreciate it. It's lovely to meet you as well.
You too.
Finally, to meet the voice behind some of those fabulous tracks, Lee John, in Outside. Well, stay with me, because on the way, the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? And we've got a huge black hole. It's going to cost us billions to make this thing. So should the government really be pouring funds into an unfinished railway project such as this in the midst of a cost of living crisis? That's all on the way after the break.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
It's fast approaching 25 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? Now, HS2 is the UK's government attempt at levelling up transport. Now, the new line is actually aimed to connect the north and the south of England. That's going from the West Midlands to Manchester, Birmingham and then London. And a report conducted by engineering experts actually revealed that the Birmingham to Manchester leg could reach a staggering £40 billion, which is almost double the original estimate, all by 2014. Now, this comes as the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt indicated that tough decisions will be taken as he aims to cover a £50 billion black hole. One of those decisions, I think they were talking about raiding the pensions, which I didn't like the sound of. And with public finances threatened to be cut whilst taxes are also being raised, the Conservative MP Greg Smith argued that scrapping HS2 could solve virtually all the Treasury's problems right now. And with COVID-19 leading to fewer people taking trains, is now really the time to be investing in such a project? So I'm asking this hour, is it time to scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? I'm joined now by former Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. Dennis, what do you think? Should they scrap it? 40 billion for this particular thing?
And as someone who was an MP in South Yorkshire for 20 years. This is outrageous. It's the south of England. It's Sunak, England. He wouldn't even notice 40 billion out of his personal wealth. Demolishing all the hopes.
I don't think he's that rich.
Well, I'll leave that to you. All the hopes of firms, people who've trained up, engineers, staff, to give us what the French and the Germans have had for 20 years of decent high-speed rail. Avanti, you've heard about that, this joke of a railway line. It's a disgrace. The World Economic Forum has just produced its annual report on the state of world railways. We are 29th between, wait for it, Kazakhstan and India.
So what are you saying? We shouldn't scrap it? Why?
Because to give some hope finally back to the north of England, because when you have proper transport links, like Eisenhower built the highways in America in the 1950s and 60s, France has got its TGV, train à grande vitesse. The Germans have got a high-speed train. Other countries have. And we're lumbering along with these Avantis who are just cancelling services, 3-4 hour journey times. And I mean, everybody in the north. GB News is a national station. It's not London News. And I'm not being critical of GB News. You know, I love you. But speak for the north. And stop speaking for all these rich Tories.
No, I'm not speaking for them at all. I'm asking a question. I personally think that actually, in a sense, I think there's parts of it they should scrap. I think there are definitely parts of it that should be scrapped.
The bits between Birmingham and Stafford, and you get into a bus replacement service.
No, I think that they should try and repurpose some of the existing infrastructure that they currently have. That they've closed. They closed off a lot of train stations in those areas as well. So I think they could reinvest in that area. Some of them.
Those are very small 19th century lines. Are built under completely different conditions. We're talking about trains going at 250 miles an hour. So you can wake up in the morning and say, hey, there's a business opportunity for me in Manchester or maybe in Leeds, even in Rotherham.
But listen, the trains, people aren't going up and down the country like these. Well, I'll tell you what, let's bring on, because I'm also joined by Conservative MP for Wokingham, John Redwood. John, thank you very much for joining me. What's your view on this then? The costs of HS2 have consistently been proven to be well underestimated. And according to this report, it predicts that the second leg of the project from Birmingham to Manchester is likely to reach 40 million, so almost double. Do you think it's time they sort of considered scrapping this thing?
Well, first thing I would challenge is this idea of the 50 billion black hole. I think the Treasury and OBR advice that seems to be leaking into the press is wrong and bad advice. I believe this is about an alleged deficit in 2025. I don't think the OBR, any more than anybody else, has any idea what the deficit's going to be in 2025. And so I would say this is not the way to conduct these discussions. I don't think we should have tax rises in a couple of weeks' time. And I think we do need to get better value for money in some of our spending. But my first cut would be in the 11 billion, which the government wishes to send to the Bank of England in order to allow it to take very big losses on bonds that it bought at very expensive prices quite recently. I think that would be quite wrong. I don't think there's any need to sell those bonds. And so my first saving would be 11 billion off the programme to finance the Bank of England. As to the railway line, I voted against it originally. The business case was always very weak. It rested upon diverting quite a lot of travellers from the existing lines, which would have undermined their business proposition. There was never a huge case north of Birmingham on capacity. There's even less of a case on capacity now because, of course, post-COVID, rail travel, passenger travel is well down, and so the capacity issue is even more remote. So I think they should review that part of the project. And the cost increases are quite alarming.
Well, I'd like to bring Dennis back in on this to respond to that. Dennis, you heard what John said. He said basically there doesn't seem to be a case for this additional transport anyway, so especially post-COVID. People simply aren't really going on trains that much.
Well, look, in that case, why are people outraged at the cutting of the Avanti services? I appreciate John, and the earlier points he made are perfectly valid ones. I'm not going to get into many of his great areas of expertise. I think this case for massive cuts is wrong. I think what Rishi Sunak is basically the bankers and the Bank of England's man and Goldman Sachs' man in number 10, and he wants to impose IMF conditionality, International Monetary Fund conditionality on Britain without going to Washington for a begging bowl. But that always has been bad news for any country as essential services get cut. Now, go back to HS2. I simply would plead with John from maybe the rolling hills and the golf courses of Wokingham. He doesn't see any need for the North to grow, but I was an MP for there 20 years. My daughter lives in Sheffield, see her a lot. The North of England's had a raw deal under all governments, not just, you can bash Tories if you like, and our country is unbalanced. And one reason is our transport communications are so weak and so slow. It's perfectly true. You can get on TransPennine, stop at 40 stations between Sheffield and Liverpool and arrive there about as quick as you'd get to kind of Canada.
Well, I want to give John a chance to respond to that, actually.
Well, I'm very disappointed by GB News that you're going in for this silly political knockabout instead of letting us discuss the things that the other channels won't discuss. I've never said that the North shouldn't grow. I'm very keen on the North growing. I think too much investment in new housing and jobs comes into an area like mine, and we need to spread that more widely around the country. And as you do that, of course, you need to upgrade the transport links, but you need to do it proportionate to the demand and the capacity. And I suspect there are many projects that are closer to fruition throughout the North, where I would be very keen to finance them, because I want results in the next 2 or 3 years, not in 15 years' time, for a project where the business case was always very weak indeed. And I know my colleagues in the North, quite a lot of them want to see improvements to their existing routes where they've got stations, because, of course, the truth about this very fast line is that very few places will be able to access it, because in order to have very fast running trains, they can't stop in many places. And so many places will have all the noise and disruption, but they won't have any of the benefit of being able to get on the train.
Well, listen, John, don't be worried, because we will discuss it. We are going to discuss it in depth after this. But thank you so much for joining me. That's John Wedwood and also Dennis McShane. Thank you so much for joining me. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Darren says HS2 needs to be scrapped as soon as possible. Not only is it a waste of money, it's the government's vanity project. Put money into actual communities instead. Chris says cancelling HS2 today could save precisely nothing. A, that's because now has not how commission works, and B, because it takes years to wind down sites across the country. Half-built bridges left dangling and vehicle half buried. To claim cancelling HS2 would help the economy now is absurd. David says scrap it. HS2 is a £120 billion answer to a problem we don't have. Getting from London to Birmingham 20 minutes faster than a commuter can already is not worth this obscene cost and terrible environmental damage. Well, those are the thoughts of those watching and listening. Keep your thoughts coming. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue our Great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill a financial black hole? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:34. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The government has announced that a pilot scheme to reduce the backlog in asylum seekers will be rolled out nationwide by 2023. The Home Office says an 8-week test run reduced the time asylum seekers waited for a first interview by around 40%. Almost 100,000 migrants are currently waiting for a decision on their asylum claims. The government could revive the British Bill of Rights in a bid to tackle the number of migrants crossing the English Channel. The legislation would give UK courts supremacy over the European Court of Human Rights, preventing judges in Strasbourg from interfering in government policy. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says the bill would end the, quote, abuse of UK law. The Prime Minister of Tanzania says at least 19 people have been killed after a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria while trying to land at a nearby airport. Local media reports say the Precision Air flight hit the water during storms and heavy rain. The airline says 26 people have been rescued so far. And the Prime Minister has announced that Monday, the 8th of May next year, will now be a bank holiday. It's in honour of the King's coronation on the Saturday before. Rishi Sunak says he looks forward to seeing people come together to celebrate and pay tribute to King Charles III. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News, the People's Channel. Back to Nana in just a moment.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart.
And I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alistair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 39 minutes after 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock even, crikey. If you've just joined me, where have you been? I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's now time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we scrap HS2 to fill the financial black hole? Now, a report conducted by engineering experts has revealed that the Birmingham to Manchester leg could reach a staggering £40 billion. That's almost double the original estimate. Now, this comes as Chancellor Jeremy Hunt indicated that tough decisions will be taken as he aims to fill a £50 billion black hole in the economy. Now, with public finances to be cut whilst taxes are also being raised. So in this hour, is it time for us to look at scrapping HS2 to fill the financial black hole? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, Danny, I'm going to start with you on this one. HS2, a lot of people probably profiteering out of it, especially there's a lot of compulsory purchasing involved with land. It's sort of midway, so there'll be things dangling if we just sort of scrap it. Yep. Do you think it's time to sort of look at it and look to scrap?
Do you know, when I was a radio presenter for the BBC, broadcasting in the...
He did
wait to the second hour.
Yeah, he did wait to the second hour.
Broadcasting across the Midlands. My phone-in hotlines were full of people moaning, quite understandably, that their family homes, a compulsory purchase. They'd lived in this beautiful rural part of Warwickshire and Staffordshire, and the government was forcing them out of these treasured homes where people, generations of families had been born there, had been passed away there, lovely stories, and they'd been forced to sell their properties. At the moment, the M42 North is being closed for periods of time whilst they have these massive bridges that are built across the 3 lanes of traffic. And I read today that by not extending it, the government will save £50 billion. And my heart goes out to all of these people. They must be living in a state of purgatory, of complete confusion. My answer to your question, my direct answer, Nana, is that I believe they should stop at Birmingham and save £50 billion. I think that in the current climate where people can work remotely, we spoke about Zoom, didn't we, in the first hour? Why is someone going to get on the Clankerty from Manchester to the capital and shave 18 minutes off their journey?
I just don't understand.
I don't get it.
Danny hits, and that sums it up, really, because if this was all about linking the north with the south and improving links, it was the idea of a Labour government. Andrew Adonis was the Transport Secretary and the Tories took it on board. Why did they build the first link then between London and Birmingham? Why didn't they go from Manchester to Birmingham if that's what they wanted?
It's the London elite, though, isn't it?
Because it's the London exactly that.
That's a good point.
And it's all the wrong way around, isn't it? And the original estimate for this wretched HS2 was 33 billion. It's now confidently predicted to be above 100 billion. No, it will go much higher because the dead hand of the government is involved and they always screw things up. So it should stop immediately. It was ill-conceived in the first place, in my view. We don't need it. And Danny makes the point, we've just been through the pandemic where we managed to get the Daily Mail out entirely with one person in the building. Not that
the paper looked OK. We didn't want to do it permanently like that. But we know half of the civil service is working from home. Lots of people now work from home, so they can use Zoom. We were talking about the COP27 conference in Egypt.
They should be Zoom.
They should be doing it on Zoom. So the whole model of getting to work quicker on the train is out of date.
I think so. And actually, what we found was that our local communities were enriched with the money that people were spending within their local communities, rather than going off somewhere to London. A lot of those little cost a fortune type shops started losing business because they weren't able to charge people extortionate prices for their sandwiches in the heart of the city, you know, and other local things. So I started to buy things locally, you know, in the pandemic.
Sure.
All the little farming shops that literally rip your eyes out with the price. But it was still cheaper than getting on transport and going to the thing, you know. So I think that we actually need to revisit how we exist and actually take some of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic. And when we are going in the wrong direction, which I think HS2 and linking the way it's going, I think it's the wrong direction.
I'm not the greatest expert on northern geography, but the argument for this could be if you had a rail line that went across the Pennines, linking up north and west, northeast and northwest England, that would be far more beneficial if you wanted to. Why didn't they do that? Because everything has to start in London.
Which goofball came up with the idea?
Andrew Adonis, I wouldn't. If you saw Andrew Adonis, you would not call him an Adonis by name or nature, which is rather unkind of me. But he came up with a plan. It was a Brown government scheme, and the Tories took off with it because. Don't remember George Osborne, the Chancellor? Northern powerhouse. We've got to be seen to be supporting the North. So this is what people in southern London think the North needs. And it's an expensive white elephant. And trust me, Nana, if they're now saying 100 billion, it'll be another 50 billion on top.
Well, the thing is, if you asked people up north as well, what would they rather? Because I think still the mentality of sort of travelling to London is still ingrained in people's psyche, especially in Westminster, that is what everyone wants to do. Nobody wants to come to London anymore. People want to work from home. They've realised the benefit of their beautiful rural surroundings, especially in lockdown. Who wants to be in a high-rise in London in lockdown? People moved out of London.
May I also
appreciate the surrounds elsewhere?
I'm a Scouser by birth, working in Birmingham.
We'd never be able to tell with that accent, would we?
I'm living in rural Warwickshire. Can I just tell you, London has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. When I drive down to London on a Sunday or on a Friday next week to come to Nana's show, and I look around me, and it's just like a load of ants just walking over each other.
That hasn't changed. It's always been like that.
No. It's far busier. It's far busier.
You think it's busier?
Yeah, I don't think. So. No, my experience is far busier, and I think you risk overestimating the appeal of London to, for example, Scousers or Brummies.
I think that the appeal of London has gone down because people have in the pandemic. People have moved out of London because they wanted space. And that's,
you live on top of each other like rats.
So advocates of it will say it's all about levelling up. Got to level up, help the North. But I was looking places like Rochdale, Dennis, who was here before, Dennis McShane arguing for it, former Labour MP for Rotherham. His constituency isn't affected by it. What they should really do is give real power to big councils up there to set a local business rate, local tax rates to attract investment. You don't need another huge unnecessary rail line scything through glorious countryside.
And people don't take the train.
Destroying countryside. Yeah,
it's not the same thing.
Because they can't afford it. You need a bank loan.
You talked about the whole Transpennine idea and everything. Yeah, great, but I still don't think that people are that interested in that anymore. I think people we're making more of our own surroundings where we are. I don't think people want to travel like that anymore. I think our psyche has changed, and I think now is the time to revisit that. But I don't know what they're going to do with all the bridges and the things that they've already set up.
Well,
it's
I hear that, and one of the arguments is, isn't it called sunk cost fallacy? Because you've already sunk so much into the ground, you've got to carry on with it because you've spent so much money. No, stop now before they waste even more public money. It's public money.
It's ours.
It's your money, my money, everybody watching money who pays taxes. It's our money, and they're going to waste it.
They could put it in so many other things, pay people more money, stop taking from... They're talking about taking money out of people's pensions or...
This could sort the NHS crisis.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right, well, this show's nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Today, I'm joined by 4 of our wonderful voices. Let's start with Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire. Not the Miranda Richardson, a different one. Miranda, what do you think? HS2.
Hi, Nana.
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good, thank you. What's your thought on this?
Do you know what? We have wasted so much money. And getting back to what I was saying earlier about the families who have had, homes taken away, land taken away. I live not far from one of the hub points that are going to go on it. It's really quite horrendous how they've ripped through parts of our countryside. Stop. stop now, because it's just not benefiting anybody. And like you say, you know, I connect with you guys when I talk over a link every week. We don't need meetings. I don't need to get on the train. I used to work in London and commute to London. If I didn't have to, I really didn't want to. You know, it'd be so much easier. People don't want to do that. If they want to look at investing, if they want to look at changing, actually put it into some of the towns that had their train stations closed.
Exactly,
that's what I said. So those connections could actually happen. You know, that makes far more sense than just ripping more of our countryside to pieces.
Well, this is what I agree with you, Miranda.
20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, let's find out what John Reid has to say. He's there in Kidderminster. John, what do you think? HS2, is it any good?
Do you know, Nana, I agree absolutely with your two guests. What an absolute waste of money this is. If we took that 50 billion, what difference would it make to the National Health Service, to the education system, to the world of carers? How many other good uses could we put that money to? I don't think necessarily at this point we should scrap it, but let's mothball it and come back to it in 2 or 3, 4 years when life is a bit more rosy. I think it's just an absolute waste of money.
Waste of money, right. Thank you for that. Let's go to Lee Harris. He's there in Bristol. Lee, what do you think?
I agree with everyone else. It's 100% yes. It's a no-brainer. In the current economic circumstances, it's absolute madness to continue with it. They should scrap it instead of raising taxes and making the spending cuts. And as we've already been said, like the costs have already been spiralling out of control since the original 15 billion estimate. It's now at 150 billion. That's more than double the 2021 annual defence budget, and it's 50 billion more than our entire education budget. It's madness. John Redwood is correct. The arguments for the potential returns are pretty weak, and it's probably going to benefit London than the North anyway. The money could also be much better spent. Investing in investing in the road network some reports have said that that's going to give a much better return. And it's got very little public support. I mean, just like pretty much everyone I've listened to so far today, very little public support for it. So it'd be popular to scrap it.
Well, so far nobody's supporting it. What about you, David? David, your thoughts?
Well, apart from the fact that I think it's the biggest waste of money ever, they have destroyed the countryside, and this is a government that's supposedly a green government. We can have zero carbon, and yet they're creating more mayhem with trees. There was a perfectly adequate system that could have been extended in taken Beecham closed down. They could very easily rip up the lines, put down new lines that would accept the high-speed trains. But quite honestly, I could go to Birmingham tomorrow. I wouldn't take the train. It would cost me 3 times as much to get on the train from New Street than it would cost me to drive. So what the hell would I want to do that for?
What is
it? Pathetic. Scrap it.
These people don't think
I'm going not 50 billion. It's going to probably cost them another 150 billion to complete the second leg, because governments have no idea how to actually cost anything. And then the unions, we want more money.
David, you're on a roll. We're all on a roll. We all agree. I don't know why they don't just speak to the normal people of this country and find out whether we want the damn thing in the first place. Well, listen, thank you so much, Miranda from Northamptonshire, John in Kidderminster, Lee in Bristol, and David in Watford. Well, let's see what you guys have been saying at home and on the radio. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Dave says it should never have been sanctioned in the first place. However, I think it will be false economy to cancel it now. So much infrastructure has been put in place for it. I'm sure there'd be some serious financial penalty clauses in construction contracts too. Now I would just pay them. I mean, for goodness sake, man. Bob says, yeah, you've got a point there. Bob says HS2 destroys the environment and ecosystems just to save what? About 10 minutes on a journey? Mabel says, why build new ones when they can't even run the old ones? You make a very good point. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I mean, it seems we have tried to find a couple of reverse views. Dennis McShane did think we should carry on with it, but all your points are valid. I don't know why the government are carrying on with it, but here. Let's hope they listen. Stop raiding our pensions. Right, let's move on to another story that caught my eye. Today, Matt Hancock had been tipped to rake in up to $1 million a year once he leaves the jungle if he decides to walk away from Westminster. The former health secretary is reported to earn $400,000 from appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. However, showbiz guru Jonathan Shalit, the CEO of Inter Talent, rights group revealed that on GB News to Mark Dolan that Hancock could face an earning potential of $1 million a year if his stint in the jungle goes well. What do my panel make of that? I'm joined here.
Well, can I tell you, I don't vote in this programme normally. I don't watch it very often, but I'm going to watch it when he's in there, and I'm going to vote for that man to be in the bush trucker trials.
Oh, yeah.
I want him to do every bush trucker trial so he can be humiliated, and then I will vote to get him off. He should surrender his parliamentary salary immediately. The money from that should go to a COVID charity, and when he comes out, the Tory party should not restore the whip to him so his political career is finished. It's an insult to everybody whose family suffered and died as a result of COVID. Remember, this is a health secretary who was accused of unloading people from our hospitals with COVID into care homes. And we've just started the first stages of the National Public Inquiry. He's tone deaf, and it's ridiculous.
He's just out for the money.
Yeah, of course he is.
Yes, he is. And do you know what? I really admire him going in. You and I are going to disagree for once in a blue moon. I really admire him going in because he's got so many critics and he's sticking two fingers up to them all.
He's got a job to do.
No,
he can't do his job in Australia.
No, but you might get out of it by saying, I can't do that for medical reasons.
Yeah, no, you're right about his job to do. No, I get that. He's saying that he can still be reached in an emergency. Maybe he's going to be the first contestant to be allowed a mobile phone.
Well, quite.
I don't know, but he is going to get voted to do all of those horrible trials.
Well, I'll vote for him. I'm looking forward to that. But now it's time for Supplement Sunday, where me and my panel discuss stories that caught our eye. Let's start with Danny, who has a story about PETA.
Do you know what? PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, they do my head in. Just Stop Oil do my head in with these public protests. OK, they've sent an open letter, scathing open letter to Ant and Dec to quit I'm a Celebrity over animal cruelty. I'm sorry, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, an insect is not an animal. I'm very sorry.
But they have feelings.
I thought they were
Are they sentient?
They're sentient beings.
I thought they were more worried about the fact that contestants have to eat kangaroos' testicles.
But they're dead, though, aren't they?
Well, I assume so.
Well, one would hope so. But that would be cruel.
But isn't this exploitation of animals for culture, for entertainment? Again, I thought they might be upset about that. Not insects.
No.
By the way, you know the joke going around the comments at the moment. Matt Hancock has spoken a load of bees for years. Now we're going to watch him eat them.
Very good.
I think I got round that in the decency thing, didn't I? Just about.
You did it well. I think you did it well.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, what have you got? It's all about the UK getting a new bank holiday.
Well, he's going to be King Charles III. Officially, the coronation is next year in May. Queen Camilla will no longer be the Queen Consort because she'll be anointed too. The government is giving us a bank holiday. It basically means the UK-wide holiday fall on Monday, so it's marked the 2nd, isn't May the 2nd, May the 8th? And we're getting a bank holiday, and I think, great, God save the King. It will be a huge international event, big worldwide television audience, and when the Republicans start whinging and worrying about the economy can't afford it, fine, go to work then, because obviously you won't want anything to do with it. You'll be working, I'll be working.
Yeah, I'll be working.
Danny might be working.
No, we'll be closed. We
closed.
close on bank holidays.
OK.
Well, we might get you in the studio.
Well, there we are then.
Double time.
Yeah.
Double time.
But this is the first coronation this country has had since 1953. It is an historic event, and I think it's right that the country...
My father, my 89-year-old beloved father, was a soldier looking after all the royalty 70 years ago, or whenever it was, 1953. Yeah, he was with the Royal Inniskillen Guards.
Good.
Yeah, I was talking to him about it the other day.
It's a great... My mum and dad slept outside Buckingham Palace overnight. Mum was already pregnant with my sister because she wanted to be part of history, and she was talking about it right to the end of her life.
Oh, bless her. Well, this is my final supplement then. This is all about gender-critical campaigners who've been deemed too dangerous by our ticketing website and as a result have had their book launch cancelled.
Oh, my God.
I mean, honestly, it's ridiculous. Earlier in the year, it's a women's meeting. They featured similar content and were cancelled by a church in Edinburgh. I mean, it's just getting so silly, isn't it?
Do you know, Nana, I read that Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, OK? He was the worst child actor in the history of Hollywood. He only got the gig because he was a small kid with round glasses. That's the only reason he got the gig. He should be more sympathetic to J.K. Rowling. And I want to ask Daniel, why are you lying? Why are you saying if a man says he's a woman, then he's a woman?
Well,
why are you lying, Daniel?
He wouldn't say it's lying, though.
Yeah, but
that would be his psychology. He believes that.
But you can't have an opinion on that.
Emma Watson, who played Hermione, who was quite a good actress, has had a good career. She owes it all to J.K. Rowling, who's been fantastic in this area.
They've terrible.
I think it's terrible. It's absolutely disgraceful. Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, should nurses go on strike? And according to our Twitter poll, 33% of you say yes. That's interesting. 67% of you say no.
They're on the right side of the argument, our viewers.
Well, listen, thank you so much to my panel, consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur, Danny Kelly.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to you at home for joining me. I'll leave you with the weather. I'll be back next week at 4. Take care.
Let's look then at this evening's weather, and the UK is looking blustery and showery as that rain continues to push in from the west. Let's home in on the detail. Starting off today in the southwest, and there'll be heavy showers through much of the evening, some thundery and blustery as well, clear spells though in between. Heading further east, and they're fairly dry, often clear skies to the end of the day, though a few passing showers possible later on. A blustery and showery evening for much of Wales, those showers feeding back in on the brisk southwesterly winds, which will also turn heavy and thundery at times. Some showers also likely across parts of the Midlands. Those should be less intense than further west, but some heavy ones are still possible, things turning drier throughout the night. And mostly dry for the northeast of England as well, with fewer showers reaching there. Some mist and fog patches, though, developing there. They could be dense. Clear skies, though, meaning